Okay, welcome to episode 63 of the SumerSports show. I think this is our last week without Thomas, at least for a little bit. So I'm Eric Eager. I'm one of the VPs of SumerSports. I'm joined by two wonderful data scientists at SumerSports, Tej Seth, Parker Fleming. Guys, how's it going?
And it's going pretty great. Football's just around the corner. I feel like every day, right? A little closer. And we had if I may say so, I feel like we had a pretty dang productive week last week. So I'm feeling good about football and about the stuff we're working on.
Yeah, I think when we see like the countdowns of jersey numbers for football, we started with defensive linemen here, and I think Dave Salfaro, our friend Eric, sent us Aiden Hutchinson's 97 the other day, and so it seems like we are getting closer to football. Going down the numbers there.
Did we lose Parker? Is Parker? Oh, we got Parker back here just for a brief second. Yeah, it is weird though, because when I was at the old place, PFF, like a lot of times we would have sort of our production type stuff like in the months of July and August. And so whenever everybody was like, oh, there's only 100 days left till the season, I was always be like, please don't remind me, like we got a ton of stuff to do. And, that always got me. I think we're a little bit further ahead now at Sumer, which I'm really happy about. So I am looking forward to the season with bated breath. Parker, hopefully that wasn't an Eric issue. Hopefully that was a Parker issue, and now you're back.
That might have been a God issue. I'm really not sure what happened. I just was out of the stream. So I think we're good. I have no idea.
A god of the gaps, if you will, which was the gap created by your picture moving and us going from 2 to 1. Today we're going to dovetail off of a really cool episode that we had last week on Monday, which was drafting quarterback contracts. We weren't as explicit about what the objective was. It was funny because Jason Fitzgerald, who runs Over the Cap, is one of my favorite football websites, one of my favorite podcasts, actually went through like a full half hour of our draft and was talking about it. And so I felt like the only issue that I had when he went over it was that we didn't state our objectives. So we are going to state our objectives. We are drafting head coaches for the next 5 years. What we are trying to maximize is the likelihood that, the Vegas betting odds for your team to win the Super Bowl at the beginning of year 6. So the basically 5 years from now, going into year 6, what are the Super Bowl winning chances for your team? Here we have a few loyal listeners coming in. Williams, excited to see if somebody will draft an assistant coach. I certainly have some on my list. Over under on how many furniture Tej has. 8. I think Tej is plenty of furniture. I'm actually in a like a condo in Florida right now. I'm having a good time. I've been working from this same chair for 8 straight hours. I'm excited to get up and go to the beach here. But Tej has plenty of furniture, I'm assuming, in his family home for a little bit here as he's graduated from college and relaxing now.
Yeah, when I'm at my parents' house, I mean, there's a lot of furniture. They care about that a lot. When I get my own place, I think all I need is just a folding chair in front of a TV to watch football in front of. I don't see the need for any more furniture.
It's funny because we just moved to Atlanta. One of the reasons we're taking this trip is because we're obviously closer to Florida now, and so meeting up with some family friends here. But I remember when I was in grad school, so right around your age, Tej, 22 to 26, I could fit everything I owned except for my bed in my car, which was like a Ford Escape or something like that. So not even like a big car. And now it's like you can't move. I would need 2 cars just for the stuff I don't want anymore, which seems like a fall from God's light if there ever was one.
Hedonic adaptation's a hell of a drug, Eric. And as we expand, there's a lot of evidence empirically that our subjective well-being depends on filling the space we have relative to, just objectively having what we have. But that's the economist in me there. I think that if I could just have a bed, I would be very, very okay with it. Why would you spend more than you have to on a chair? Because every extra dollar you could spend would just go to making the TV and the sound system better for the football watching experience. So that's pretty much all you need, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get going. So Tej, you drew the names for this head coaching draft. Again, our objective is at the start of year 6, do you have the highest Super Bowl win chances with the team that you currently are? You're taking over an average roster is another assumption as well. We're not taking Andy Reid with the current Chiefs roster, so that's something to think about as well. So I believe Tej, you're first, are you not, or is it Parker?
Parker as the first pick, then
Parker's
you, and
first.
then I'm third.
Okay,
Are
so I got second.
Are we tracking this?
Tej is tracking this, right?
Do we have like a document or something? I don't want to make double picks.
Yeah, I shared the document with you
this?
guys, but I can reshare it.
Do that. I don't think I see it on my teams, but that's probably because
Okay.
Teams is terrible. That's probably nothing that you did there. Okay, so if I'm on the clock, first pick, I'm gonna document my process a little bit and then see what I want to do. Okay, so I'm trying to say year 6, I give this guy 5 years of building up a system, building around the right players, getting my team to a high level of calibrate of competitiveness. We're probably going to compete for a couple Super Bowls before that, because I think that we'll kind of year 6 doesn't necessarily have to be our breakthrough, but we're talking about like sustaining that. So things I'm going to think about are against the spread, kind of your general vibes, your age, and your I'm totally stealing Eric, our coaching model. I won't document all the results from that, but I'll just talk about them in terms. I'm looking at that as my leaderboard as well. So I think that the obvious pick here is like the best oldest coach who's not too old. Like I'm not taking Carroll, I'm not taking Belichick. Probability that they're there for year 6 is very low in my mind. But I think that you've got to look at Andy Reid as the number 1 overall pick. Barely. He's 1A to 1B. I assume that 1B will get taken in the second pick here. But I'm going to go Andy Reid because he scores really high in our coaching model, which kind of counts the intangible, decision making that you had that I really like. He's obviously pretty good against the spread overall. And pretty good in just objective, the expectations are high and he still overperforms. And I think lastly, the concern there is like, okay, well, if you take away Pat Mahomes, what is Andy Reid? Well, I think that largely the Chiefs found Pat Mahomes because Andy Reid had a very good sense of what he wanted in a quarterback and has a very good, strong sense of an identity of how to make a winning football team and would be able to either, find the right way to mesh the average roster into an above average roster and start acquiring talent, or would find that quarterback of the future. So I'm going to go with Andy Reid at 1-1 here. I think he's clearly the best coach in the NFL right now. And I think that, a little close to my age threshold, but I still think for a 6-year period, a 5-year period is plenty fine to take him and let him coach into his golden years.
Yeah. Andy Reid, I think interestingly, he got us all to believe that Donovan McNabb was an amazing player, and then he traded him within the division, and then his career was over. Takes over a Chiefs team that was 2-14. Now they did have 6 Pro Bowlers on that 2-14 team, but 2-14, Alex Smith won more than 60% of his games with Andy Reid taking over a 2-14 team. I don't think this is really close. The only question is whether or not you think he's going to coach this long, which he is an older guy, he's a bigger guy. There's a lot of questions in Kansas City about how long is he going to be there. But when you think about him, he's so obsessed with football that I think that this is a pretty solid choice. I think Andy Reid's been the best coach in the NFL since at least back to 2019. I don't think that that's really been a question. Tej, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I would have taken Andy Reid first as well. I think just what he offers you from a play calling standpoint is, only up there with a few select coaches in the league. And then with Andy Reid, you have to mention the game management has gotten so much better with experience. He's gone from so many memories of him mismanaging timeouts at the end of halves to being 10th in win probability added over expected last year from a game management standpoint when you factor in 4th downs, 2-point conversions, timeout, and delay of game usage. And so all of that stuff together, I think, makes Andy Reid the best coach in the league right now.
And can I say from a dynasty building standpoint, I feel very high about Andy Reid recruiting a coordinator who would take over in year 7, for instance, and mentoring him. I think that that's also a very high probability. So I think this is the obvious pick that sets you on the best path.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's a part of that Andy Reid thing. I mean, the reason why Eric Bieniemy's situation became such a hot topic was Andy Reid had created a lot of head coaches before. Doug Peterson, Sean McDermott, John Harbaugh. Like, he had done like a decent amount of work. Matt Nagy, and so that was like, there was almost, it's weird, but like the Eric Bieniemy saga, it was in large part built by the expectation that Andy Reid had built for himself in getting coaches, now predominantly white coaches, into that spot. And so that was where the tension was with Bieniemy, was because it had been an Andy Reid thing. I'm going to go second here. This one's a little interesting because Shanahan and McVay, to me, are I see where it comes from, and I really like Shanahan and McVay, and I do want to eventually take one. But I'm actually going to go with somebody who's always scored well in the in-game decision making, that's always overcome a lot in terms of injuries, quarterback changes. He's won a Super Bowl before. I'm going to take John Harbaugh of the Baltimore Ravens here. Again, he never like scores first in any of those like decision-making matches, but he's always top five, which we saw like Frank Reich fall off one year. We've seen Andy Reid oscillate between those two. Shanahan and McVay are not great at those things. And so, the question is, have you ever lost an edge? And then like, what I really like is, it might've taken them a little too far, but this is kind of like with Andy Reid and Bob Sutton, where they finally, got moved on at offensive coordinator and became a thing of them competing. So I like John Harbaugh as the leader of my team, and I'll take him first here in this draft.
I really like that pick because I think John Harbaugh offers you so many different edges where even if you start from his background as a special teams coordinator, one of the hardest jobs, underrated hardest jobs in all of football, because you have to coordinate so many different things. You only get players for select periods of practice, and you can kind of see how that's gone on to the Ravens. And then obviously the game management stuff, sixth in win probability added over expected last year from in-game decisions. He's always, consistently top 5, top 6. So I really like that pick a lot. Parker, what do you think about it?
Love this, big vote of confidence for me because he hired a Yale economics major, great game theory guy, and trusted him and did some game management stuff there. But also, I think that this is a really interesting kind of strategic argument in a draft format for like coaches for the sixth year, because do I think that John Harbaugh is going to have the highest peak of any coach we could potentially draft? By no means. But is there an argument that he's going to have the highest floor? Absolutely. So if you look at the pattern of building up the Super Bowl, maximizing Super Bowl odds as kind of like a sequential iterative process, high floor, high floor, high floor, high floor, that team is going to be able to build towards something, I think. And so I like this from a consistency and kind of a developmental standpoint, as well as the in-game stuff. I also like guys who make bold moves, and I think bringing Monken back to the league is a bold move, and should be interesting. I mean, I think Lamar Jackson's awesome. I don't think every NFL head coach could make the most out of Lamar Jackson, so he certainly gets credit for that as well.
That is a really good point, by the way. Like, I think we all, with the first two guys we just talked about, Mahomes the 10th pick, Lamar Jackson the 32nd pick. I think in hindsight, we're all like, of course that was going to work. But actually, it took something. I mean, like, where we don't get the no offense, Tej, but like Patrick Mahomes to the Detroit Lions. We don't get that. We don't get, Cleveland Browns, getting Lamar Jackson. We don't get those, counterfactuals. And I think it's important to give at least a little bit of credit to those coaches. All right, Tej, you have the turn here.
Yeah. So next two picks here. I really like both of the coaches that you guys have taken. And I'll, with the third pick, I'll go with Kyle Shanahan. I think he is the best play caller in the league. With him, you're going to lose some of an edge in game management, but I think everything he does from an offensive design and a play calling perspective is just at such a high level. We've seen him do it with so many different quarterbacks, starting from 2016 Falcons, giving Matt Ryan that MVP season, the best season of his career, going to San Francisco, where he's made Jimmy Garoppolo rank top 5 in EPA per play every year, got Brock Purdy to the NFC Championship game I think that just all the things that Shanahan does from a play calling standpoint is really good. And then the culture in San Francisco seems to be very high end, and I think that's an underrated aspect of Shanahan's coaching ability is they are constantly churning out these high level players and coordinators that go off to be pretty good head coaches. Robert Saleh got hired by the Jets, and they've been pretty much turned around and are top 10 in Super Bowl odds this year. Mike McDaniel had a great first year with the Miami Dolphins and his play calling there. And then D'Amico Ryan just got hired. So Shanahan's been able to do this with so many different coordinators. I don't know if many coaches would be able to do it with that much turnover. So I'd take him with the number 3 pick there.
I mean, the dude won a playoff game with Brock Purdy.
I feel like if he was better in game, if he had a little bit more humility in game, he'd be lapping the and part of this is part of my thing. If I were the GM or an owner of a team, I would still trade the 2-1s to pick him up, and then I would say, look, you have an in-game nerd standing next to you on 4th downs. Like that's the one stipulation. I'm going to pay you like a king. You're going to have power over 50, like all the stuff. I'll give him all the stuff except for 4th downs and timeouts and stuff like that. I feel like that would be a way to go there. All right. A pick 4, Tej.
Yeah. So I like taking the really high end offensive mind with the first pick with the 4th pick, my 2nd pick. I'm going to go with Mike Tomlin. I saw Nathan mention him in the chat here as a coach that should be considered very highly. And I think, again, like we don't really see Mike Tomlin's effect because he's not known like a Kyle Shanahan, like an Andy Reid, as a top tier offensive or defensive mind like a Belichick is known as. But the effect that Mike Tomlin has is very clear on the Steelers. Never had a losing season there, no matter what roster makeup they've got. And I think that he'll give you this really high level stability. And, while you could say that with Ben Roethlisberger at his peak and Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, like they maybe should have had more playoff success. They maybe should have won a Super Bowl. But I think, Parker, you mentioned this, like the floor that Mike Tomlin gets you, where you'll just consistently be in the playoffs, in playoff contention every single year, is worthwhile. And then you just hope that you get that year where variance breaks your way and you break through.
Yeah, for sure. A Super Bowl winning guy. We talked about him on the show. Now, I think we mistakenly said that he wasn't calling defensive plays, but I think that he was actually calling defensive plays for a few years, but it was certainly hidden from the view of most people, which is kind of interesting. So he maybe is a little bit more than kind of that Tampa 2 guy as far as schematically concerned, but certainly an incredible motivator. I'm gonna do what I said in the first.
Wait,
I'm gonna take this.
Is it me? Wait, is it me? Hold on, I have one.
No, it snakes around. So Eric's here.
It snakes around.
Oh, I'm first. I thought I was second. I was going from the last one. Sorry, it's all running together. I apologize.
You got Andy Reid, which I would have taken first. I'm gonna take Sean McVay.
Yeah.
I actually there's a question about if McVay will be around. I think that's overblown. I think he's a football junkie, much in the same way we are. One thing I really liked about McVay, a couple of things I like about McVay. He made a 4th down decision in the Super Bowl that I really liked. That was against his character. I do think he runs the ball too much on early downs. I do think he gets caught up to some years. Like early season, what did they start 3-0? Like basically every season in his tenure, except for maybe the first one. And then, last year was a little rough. The one thing I really like is when they started out, it was John Fossil. It was Wade Phillips. It was kind of this like veteran group around him. And then in the Super Bowl year, and one of the reasons I was always kind of betting under on them when I was at PFF, they completely switched, right? They went Raheem Morris and Kevin O'Connell. Like they switched out like all their assistant coaches, and then they won a Super Bowl. And I just think that there's like an interesting kind of dynamic there where you're like willing to change, you're willing to upend things. They were predominantly a 11 personnel team for a long time. They played more of different things when the personnel changed. I'm a big fan of Sean McVay. I don't think he's perfect by any stretch, and we're getting into flawed coaches already. But I think he's a good pick here for me.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, how many coaches would make that decision of moving on from Jared Goff, a quarterback that led you, was the starting quarterback when you went to a Super Bowl and had one down year? I think it showed kind of where Sean McVay understands that you need some type of wider range of outcomes at quarterback play, and it paid off in the Rams' favor to win the Super Bowl. And I think again from a play calling standpoint, like he's as good as it gets, and especially those first 8 to 10 weeks when you really see the new offense he designs every year, that the Rams almost always consistently rank in the top 3, top 5 of expected points added per play early on in the season.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. I think, yeah, there's a little bit of I can fix him energy with like, oh, is he burnt out? Does he not want to coach or whatever? It's like, hey man, I'll make it cool. Like we can, we can put like a keg in your office and stuff and convince you to stay. So I'm actually shocked that the pick that I'm going to make is still here. I thought he was going to be gone for sure. So I'm pretty happy about this to go Andy Reid #1 and then go Sean Payton next. Feel like, again, under 60. So, he's going to have a couple years. He's coming back to coaching. So had a couple years to recoup while potentially his, his peers who are that old might have been a little more ground down. Was winning as coach in franchise history for the Saints. Got a Super Bowl. Granted, it was in 2009. So like, how much does that matter for 2022? But I think especially veil of ignorance with an average roster. I want experience, and I want a guy who's demonstrated he can take a team to the top. His, against a spread record, I think is second only to Bill Belichick over the course of his coaching career. And so I think very, very clear second pick for me here is to take Sean Payton. As much as I want to get into the young guys, I'm going to get into the young guys with the next pick, but I feel like I got to take Payton here.
I feel so happy because I have my big board of 6 and they're all gone after 6 picks. I feel like
yes,
even
awesome.
though, and it's fun because obviously Tej, you're very much an NFL fan. Parker, you're an analyst. You obviously are an NFL analyst, but your favorite sport is college football. And so I feel like we've got this like independent ensemble, and we come up with the same 6 names, which feels good to me. All right, and then you get to go on the turn, Parker. I almost jumped the gun here, but you get 2 slots here.
Okay, I think that this is going to be my first weird one. I'm actually really buying what Sean McDermott is selling in Buffalo.
I would have taken Sean McDermott had you not taken him.
I think they had a couple injuries and a couple issues, but I think they've built a really nice Super Bowl window here. I'm confident in him being able to do it again. He brought in, Joe Brady to, help and maximize Josh Allen. I think that all of the qualities I'm looking for in an NFL head coach, I think like Sean McDermott has taken Buffalo into just a really solid, consistent powerhouse. They're going to be at the top of the betting markets again this year. And barring some injuries again, I think they should absolutely have a shot at getting into that championship game and then potentially winning it. So really like that. And hopefully my team is located in a warm weather. Let's play in Miami or something, so we don't have to deal with the Buffalo climate. Maybe that helps overall with the game and the strategy. But I really like what they've done on offense. Really like who he's brought in to kind of improve his team, and I like the consistency year over year. Sean McDermott is also pretty young, 48 relatively, so coming down in age here as I pick. But again, a guy I think that can maintain a pretty high floor over the course of this. Cycle, and clearly can show that he can potentially, identify my quarterback of the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, they came in, interestingly, in 17, right? And I remember because I watched this game. They played the Vikings in the preseason one day, and then they traded Ronald Darby and Sammy Watkins like the next day. And we're like, we're not trying to win here. And then they went 9-7, made the playoffs, gave Jacksonville a game. And then they were like, that was supposed to be a tank year, so we're going to move up for Josh Allen. And then Josh takes a couple years, but they've been perennially in the playoffs. I do worry about a couple things with Buffalo. Firstly, getting that, as Buffalo fans know, getting that close multiple years in a row it's just really hard. I feel like they're going to win it. Like this, to me, is like the year where they could very well win the Super Bowl because everybody's talking about the Bengals and the Chiefs and all that. And like usually, if you're in that basin of contending teams, you win one when no one expects you to. And so that, like, if you want to think about betting, like, to me, that feels like a good bet because they're always going to sort of be in there with a good defense and obviously a great quarterback, great coach. The other one is Leslie Frazier, the defensive coordinator, has taken some time off. So Sean McDermott is going to be calling plays for that defense for the first time. This has nothing to do with this draft, but I'm just saying, like, it'll be interesting to see McDermott, who is generally speaking passed every test as the Bills head coach with flying colors. He has, kind of another test this year, which should be interesting to see the results of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're very quick to forget. This time last year, the Bills were the preseason Super Bowl favorites. Most ranking shows had them having a top 5 offense, top 5 defense, which factors in Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott's kind of synergy that they have in the as GM and head coach there. And then the Bills, were playing well enough, even despite a lot of injuries, to be 5.5 point favorites against the Bengals. So in the playoff game, so the betting market respected them a lot, and that game ended up not going their way. But I think, like, because of how bad that loss was to the Bengals, there's a lot of recency bias about the Bills, about Sean McDermott, about Josh Allen, and I think that it's very smart to buy the dip right now.
Yeah, I think if they would have won that game against the Bengals in Buffalo, and that AFC title game would have been in Atlanta, the Bills probably would have been a field goal favorite against the Chiefs. And and even if you factor in Mahomes' injury, which I don't like, even if the Chiefs were completely healthy, I think that the Bills were 4-point favorites in Arrowhead against the Chiefs in October, and won and covered, or 3-point favorites. I think won and covered that game back all the way in October. It was really Thanksgiving that was kind of the beginning of the end for them, when they lost Von Miller against Detroit and kind of had to grind that game out, and things got kind of weird. But they're a very good team, and to your point, Tej, you're buying the dip there. I really like that pick by you, Parker, a very, very knowledgeable one, because I would have taken it had I jumped the gun there and not let you get the turn. Now I think you get into some interesting names, right? Because you get culture guys like Carroll, Vrabel, Campbell. You get more analytical guys, and again, Reich, LaFleur, Sirianni, Stefanski. Like, I think that's where you get, I'm going to get 2 of those guys. I think I'm going to go, and this is, again, me buying a little bit of the dip here. I'm going to take Matt LaFleur of Green Bay. I've always liked Matt LaFleur. A lot of people will say, look, like, anybody can be successful with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. And while that, I feel like directionally that makes sense, people forget that the 2017 Green Bay Packers were, I believe, 7-9, if I'm not mistaken. And then the 2018 Packers were 6-9-1. Takes over, goes 13-3, kind of a Mickey Mouse 13-3 in 2019, to the point where Rodgers played poorly enough so that they drafted Jordan Love. And then they get 2 MVP seasons out of Rodgers. They win 13 games both of those times. I think dragging that team last year to a place where you have a home game in Week 18 to make the playoffs, you were out of it and you got that team up. People will choose to look at the fact they lost to Detroit. Detroit was a hot team at the time, all that stuff. I think Matt LaFleur does a really good job. The one place where I get worried is obviously the timeout usage, but I'm willing to bet that that's Aaron Rodgers and not LaFleur, and I'm willing to bet that we are going to, in 2023, see his true greatness as a coach, because I think Jordan Love will be good enough for that team to contend for the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great pick. That's who I would have taken with the next pick. I think I like the point about the timeouts versus the rest of the stuff. Last year, using the win probability added over expected model that you created, Eric, LaFleur had 64.6% win probability added over expected on 4th downs, the highest mark of any coach in the league. But in timeouts, he was one of the worst coaches in the league at minus 40% win probability added over expected, just on using timeouts, which I think was more Rodgers as well.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, if we're going to criticize him for Rodgers making it easy, then I feel like we can't penalize him for what might or might not have been total focus from Rodgers down the stretch. Is that fair to say? I don't want that to be too negative, but like,
Yep.
I think there's obviously some concerns about buy-in towards the end of the season. So if we're going to penalize him for Rodgers being good, I don't think I'm going to crucify him for Rodgers, not being 100% there overall. So I like that, Eric. I think the coaching model has him 8th last season. So again, up there. And as the world's most casual Tennessee Titans fan, gotta say, I'm into it. Love him. One of those situations where I was like, I like Vrabel, but man, maybe they could have kept the coordinator and had a better coach. A more fun offensive coach at the very, very least there for the Titans. So I think that's a great pick. And he was definitely where are we now? We're at pick 8. He was in my top 10 very, very firmly. So yeah, it's a great pick.
Yeah. And Eric, I do have to say, I mean, your ability to rattle off teams' records off the top of your head is very impressive. When Face ID doesn't work, I barely can remember my phone password half the time. So for you to remember what the Packers went in 2017 and 2018 is super impressive to me.
We will be in a meeting and Eric will be like, that reminds me of this Vikings game from 1994 where they were down by 13 with 12 seconds left in the game. And then you're like, what?
It's so
Where
funny.
does this come from?
I enumerate social gatherings in my life. Like when my aunt got married, I knew who played that weekend. Like Tej, when you and Zach and I went to watch the Eagles Giants and like the Vikings Lions game was on and we were restoring the roar. Like it's weird, but like when it's sort of that scene in in a Road Trip where the guy's like, I can learn anything. I just got to find a way to relate the material. For some reason, I can relate kind of like everything back to what was happening in the football calendar, which I'm just lucky that there's a market for that. But it's funny. I think, by the way, Aaron Nagler, friend of the show, said I was spot on the floor. That was my audience of one there on that rant about Matt LaFleur and how he's worth that pick. But anyway, Tej, we're in Dan Campbell territory here. I don't know if you're going to go with it, but we are in Dan Campbell territory.
Yeah, I mean, I still have a couple coaches here that I'll take ahead of Dan Campbell, and hopefully he can work his way back to me. And you just mentioned our friend Zach Drepkin at the Eagles, and I will go with Nick Sirianni here. A little bit of antics on the sideline I can deal with. I'll put my foot down if I'm the owner of the team here. But I think Sirianni in the way that he understands analytics and uses analytics is almost better than probably any coach in the league. Was first in game decision making last year from a win probability added standpoint. Really good on fourth downs. Has done really good with the offense. Being able to realize that he couldn't game manage and call plays at the same time, and giving the play calling duties to Shane Steichen was really impressive. And we see the next iteration of that. Making another good coordinator hire in Sean Desai, who has gotten very high remarks around the league at defensive coordinator, and then everything else that Sirianni has done. This roster when he took over was in a flux, and he's helped Jalen Hurts develop to where he is now, and Devontae Smith has played at a pretty high level, and I think we've seen with these young players that he's doing really well, and I think using analytics especially well. So I would take him to close out the third round.
Yeah, I think one thing about Sirianni that you just really like is, with the Super Bowl is weird, right? Like in theory, they probably should have gone for that fourth down that Kadarius Toney ran the punt back almost for a touchdown. But like for most reasonable fourth downs, he's going for it. Like most within like almost any time where I'm like, oh yeah, that they should go for it, they go for it. And I think that there's a lot of adherence to, some really smart thinking there in that building in Philadelphia. I have to live up to a bad prediction for me. Like 2021, I looked at that roster. I put down some pretty sizable bets, plus money, of course, like a lot to one, but like pretty big bets that they would have the worst record in the league. And then they go 9-8. Like, I love the fact that, we can test our predictions like that, but it helps you kind of like when you're wrong, you go back and you're like, well, to your point, like he didn't keep calling plays. He didn't, and they went out and shored up their weaknesses and stuff. I just think that that's a great organization. And they've just had really good head coaches in Philadelphia for a long time.
My one, and to call it a concern, I think would be too much there. But like, look at all the turnover they had this year, and look at where the roster was in 2021. You do wonder. All right, they had an easier schedule last year. I think that's undeniable, and kind of the path they took. But they still did great with it. They have some really good athletes. I like his approach to things. I certainly wouldn't feel bad like building, but I do think there's a question. If I was going to try to get a causal estimate of the effect of Nick Sirianni, I think there'd be a lot of trouble identifying that relative to the surroundings, because the Eagles are so, one, organizationally aligned, and two, so organizationally smart. I mean, like, yeah, I think a lot of coaches could do pretty okay with a bunch of Georgia players on defense, like, and so they're building a team in the right way, and he's certainly benefiting from that, but he's also helping on top of that. I think to get that precise estimate would be an open question and kind of a confusing problem. So I think that's the only reason he's a little bit lower on my board than, I mean, obviously with the turn here, he would be in my top 15, my top 12, frankly. But I do wonder about like the kind of mutual endogeneity of the support and the alignment from the front office with his quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. And that's definitely something I thought of, right? Like with Kyle Shanahan, we've seen him with multiple offensive defensive coordinators. So we can assign a bigger slice of the pie to him and the 49ers success. With the Eagles success, it's harder, right? Like Howie Roseman is one of the best GMs in football. And then obviously both coordinators got hired as head coaches this year. So they must have been having a pretty big effect as well. But I just think that, like Eric mentioned, the process that Sirianni has had, his first year massively exceeding expectations, and then last year again going over the Eagles win total, you can really apply a lot of the effects to someone in the organization. And I would like to give it to Sirianni and the Eagles analytics staff.
So one thing that's I think one thing that I really like about Sirianni, and I like the same things about some of these other guys, is the head coaching job. It's not easy, but it's also not, it sounds weird. It's not easy, but it's not complicated, right? Like it's, I don't know how to, like, in a lot of ways, like you're really looking to, motivate people, which again is not easy, but it's not complicated. And you're looking to like make the right decision on big, broad things, which again is not complicated, but easy. It's not easy, but not, but it's not complicated, right? So I bungled that, but like,
and we've seen a lot of people do a really bad job with it. We've seen people like make it look very hard and make it very complicated. And so like, right, you do get credit for being able to do like, hey, if something's lined up for a straight shot putt, you get credit for making that putt, and I feel like that's what the Sirianni argument is.
If you're Andy Reid, right, there's an opportunity to try to overthink a guy like Mahomes, for example. If you're, whereas a guy like Shanahan has to overthink the quarterback, right? Because they put they're each guy has like kind of a different question to have to answer. But to me, it's that's an important part of this whole thing. And I think Sirianni does a lot of the not complicated things really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like that way to put it a lot. It's like when I was in elementary school and I was like, oh, like, I don't actually know what the president does all day. Like, I wonder if any of us could do that. And then I realized that there's a lot to do as president, but as long as you don't overcomplicate things, I think it works out okay. But so Sirianni to close out the third round, and then, I mean, this is really where it starts to get tough. I feel like you have to start to balance age versus like ability here, and there are. I've taken some pretty young coaches that I think will last all 5 years of the time frame here. This is a coach that I'm not 100% sure that he's going to last the full 5 years. And taking Bill Belichick here is I think the right thing for me to do. And I think I should make this clear. Like, I am getting Bill Belichick the head coach and not Bill Belichick the GM. We know that some of his GM ability has been really, really good lately, and so I'm just getting the head coach because of that. And then there's some ups and downs to the GM. But when you just look at Bill Belichick the head coach, from what he can still do as a defensive play caller is up there with anyone in the league right now. Like with what he walked in, losing J.C. Jackson to free agency from that defense last year, and having these rookie inexperienced corners and still ranking top 3 in defensive EPA per play was super impressive. He again, he's showed that he can take like a roster that isn't up to par, doesn't have the elite quarterback that many other teams have in the AFC, and still go down to the final couple of weeks competing for the playoff spot. And I still think about the 2019 Patriots defense that Belichick was running as one of the best defenses of the last couple of years, and then what he did in Mac Jones's rookie year, where the Patriots walked into the season with very little expectations, a rookie quarterback that was the 5th quarterback taken in the draft, and at one point they were 10-3 and the 1 seed in the AFC before it kind of fell off. So I still really trust Bill Belichick to set a great culture and to get the roster up to par.
Yeah, there was the time. This is the paper that Timo and I submitted to Sloan that didn't get accepted, but it was like you would look at their defense and they would. Stephon Gilmore was like responsible for the biggest amount of space, and J.C. Jackson was responsible for the smallest. And you like sort of put the quarterback in a position to throw to 2 equally bad situations. Either you throw it to a lot of space to a guy who's great, or to a small amount of space where there's not a lot of space. And the guy, and he really does engineer great defense. I get worried about the in-game decision making. He's, objectively really bad there. And that worries me. And you do wonder how much of it in hindsight with Brady. I do think that Belichick's a great example of somebody for which the game evolves really quickly, and he's still really, really good at what made them really, really good. But you lose Brady and then the time evolution of the game, and it's enough to be, an 8-9 win team, but is it enough to win consistently without that superstar quarterback is probably a really good question.
Yeah, I agree with both that. I don't even know that I have anything to add. Like, obviously, Belichick's great, but he's super old right now. And I will say the one thing that strikes me as odd is, like, if you think about like a cop movie, it's like, all right, I'm going to gear up for my one last ride. Like, this is my final mission or whatever, an action movie. And they're like putting on guns and like driving a cool car and stuff. It does feel a little underwhelming that Belichick's last ride is with Mac Jones at quarterback. Mm-hmm. In the sense of like, oh, this feels decidedly unsexy, but I think Bill likes that. They're saying like, hey, we've identified a guy we can try to build around and have success with. And part of me wanted Bailey Zappi to come in and just like be this all-time gunslinger. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but obviously, yeah, a guy that's at the top of his field and deserves every word of praise anyone could say about him, and does have that Nick Saban-esque quality of being able to say, fine, if you guys want to play football this way, we're going to do it that way, and I'm going to win. And I think that's been very impressive.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that was a big part of the tension between Brady and Belichick at the end, was he truly believed Brady was one of those quarterbacks. And to Tom Brady's like everlasting credit, he was the first 3 Super Bowls, and he became a legitimate like top end talent type player. Like, you look at like 2012, 2013, the guy couldn't throw a deep ball. And now he retired as one of the most effective quarterbacks of all time, and somebody who the ball knowers truly had to respect as an all-time great. And I think Belichick was probably the foremost ball knower. Having to come to grips with that, much like we all did, was probably really jarring for him, and probably why it didn't end as well as it started there. This one's really tricky for me, because I could go. So there's a couple that are safe to me, like Brian Daboll, Mike Vrabel. Those are safe to me right now. There's also Frank Reich, who you buy the dip on. Kevin Stefanski, you're buying the dip on. And I'm going to buy a big dip, because this is if you look at this value relative to last year, it's immense. And I'm going to go with Los Angeles Chargers head coach Brandon Staley here. Brandon Staley is the biggest change in public perception of a guy from one year to the next. And I know that he, like, for lack of a better term, was stout on a bunch of 4th downs last year. I know that he, there something always happens with the Chargers. I get that. But there was a moment in a Sunday Night Football game last year where it was the beginning of the 3rd quarter, and it was like 3rd and 9 or something like that. I'm getting the details directionally correct, probably absolutely wrong. And the clock went down to like 4 or 5 seconds on the play clock. And Justin Herbert looked over at Staley, and Staley shook his head. Like, no, you're taking a delay. Because this timeout's worth more to us than these freaking 5 yards. And I'm like, I can work with that. I can work with a coach who is thinking through these things probabilistically in their head and choosing not to do it out of self-preservation in the case of some of those 4th downs than a guy who has no clue. So I'm going to go with Brandon Staley, Los Angeles Chargers head coach here, because I think he'll come back to Jesus on the 4th down stuff, and he has some of the other goods that I really like.
Yeah, I think that's a really good pick. I think that, again, right here, it's like, I mean, we've really reached a tier of like, who do you like? Like, I'm just on principle not going to take Pete Carroll because he's, 70, and I wasn't going to take Bill Belichick here. So I think for like a 6-year game that both of those guys are kind of irrelevant. At this point, you are taking culture guys, right? It's like, who do you like? And you mentioned this guy, and I was a little bit worried that you were going to take him, but like, Brian Daboll comes in and takes, Giants were negative 158 in point differential in 2021, and then negative 6 last year. Like, I don't know that it was his necessary decision to pay Daniel Jones what he paid, but like, given that you have Daniel Jones on your team, he did a great job with what they had, and I'm kind of high on him. This is probably buying. I mean, we're late enough now that I don't think it's actually buying high, but like, it is buying a little bit high to take him. But I'm going to go with Daboll here. I think he's good. I think he's in a coaching model. He's 5th in terms of the on-field stuff. And so I think a good pick here, a guy who, knows how to take what's on his plate and make something out of it. So, plus I like him. Looks like a guy I'd get a beer with. So I'm going to take him here for my, this is my 8th pick, or I mean, not my 8th pick, my 5th pick.
4. So we're just rounding so you have 2 more picks. You have 1 right now.
Okay. So then I go to the other one here. Staley being off the board is a huge bummer for me. Right here. I think that I'm going to continue with the vibes and take Doug Peterson. Again, just if I'm trying to estimate the causal effect of a coach, the Jaguars were something in 2021, and they were something very different in 2022. I think his stock is on the rise. I think their stock is on the rise. Granted, being given Trevor Lawrence and some talented, college guys, I think is a really good situation to be in. Being in a terrible division, obviously a very good situation. But again, I think that in the NFL, a lot of what you're doing is arranging talent and coordinating guys. So I'm going to stick with him here and take Peterson as my next pick.
Yeah, that's a very good choice. I'm going to go quickly here because we have put a lot. I think this has been great analysis here. I'm going to go quickly. I'm going to take vibes. Mike Vrabel, head coach, Tennessee Titans. I look. He wins more than his roster gives rise to. That's the end of it.
I think you really saw Vrabel last year hold Mahomes to his least efficient game of the season with, a defense that has some good players on it, but definitely not the type of defense that you'd expect to do that to the Chiefs last year in that Sunday night game, where they almost beat the Chiefs with Malik Willis throwing like 6 passes in the course of the game. So I like that a lot. I'm gonna buy the dip on Kevin Stefanski here. I think when this season is all said and done, I think that Kevin Stefanski will be regarded as one of the better coaches in the NFL. I think what he did with Baker Mayfield, winning the Browns a playoff game for the first time in a long time, is like a really, really good job on his part. And then, this one's tough, right? So if I were to take a non-current head coach right here, I would take Ben Johnson if I was going that direction, but I still think there are good coaches available. And I'm going to take Mike McDaniel. I think like, Parker, you talk about vibes. He might be the funniest coach in the league. All of his interview comments, if I was an owner, I feel like I would just love hanging out with him. He could take me, we could go get Yeezys and really cool looking joggers and all the stuff that he wears together. Really, really upgrade my wardrobe with him. And then just from a play calling standpoint, I think he's tremendous what he was able to do last year with Tua and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and piecing that offense all together was really good.
I think that's a great pick and a little bit undervalued. Okay, for my last pick, I thought about two names that aren't currently coaches: Ben Johnson and Ejiro Evero. Those are two guys now, principally a defensive coach. I'm not necessarily the highest on, but I know Evero kept that thing together in Denver, which was a privilege last year for everybody to watch. But everything I know about everything tells me Frank Reich is going to have success in Carolina. And I think about his process. I think about him as a guy. Everybody I know on the Colts thinks he's a tremendous person, a good motivator. He dealt with a lot of crap in Indy. I think they're going to have, again, and I'm not supposed to take him in his Carolina settings, but it feels like that kind of setting that he's taken on in Carolina. I think Frank Reich is going to be successful. So I'm going to take him here over Dan Campbell. That's for everybody who says that I'm a restore the roar homer. I'm going to go with my head here, and I'm going to go Frank Reich, head coach, Carolina Panthers.
I thought Mike McDaniel was going to be here. I'm scrambling real quick. Again, I'm going to do something like take Sam Howell. I don't want to take Dan Campbell because of vibes. I think that he and my management styles would definitely clash. Maybe this is like a Titans homer, or just again, kind of the argument of Mike Vrabel of the roster is actually pretty bad, and Arthur Smith helped them come up with a pretty interesting offense. And I'm at least intrigued at the upside there. So I don't know that he's great at the on-field stuff. We have him at 13th, I think, in the coaching model. In terms of what he's doing on the field, he evidently likes Desmond Ridder, which is certainly a question that I would want to have more answers to before I was fully sold on this. But for the last pick in the draft here, I think you could leave a lot on the table. I thought about D'Amico Ryans here, just because, again, San Francisco guy, defense could be pretty good culture. So I would say I'm 51-49 on that, and I'll just take Arthur Smith because I'm a Titans homer, evidently, and say that I liked him and his time there. So I think that's my final pick.
The Atlanta Falcons, which is our Parker not laughing is my favorite when he knows that I'm trying to dad joke into the conversation.
It's funnier when it's not funny, though. That's the whole point about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funnier when it's not funny. Very good. I like this. Let me just recap here. Parker picked first. He took Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Sean McDermott, Brian Dable, Doug Peterson, Arthur Smith. I went second. I took Harbaugh, McVay, LaFleur, Staley, Vrabel, and Reich. Mix of a couple good play callers and a couple few vibes people. Tej took Kyle Shanahan, Mike Tomlin, Nick Sirianni, Bill Belichick, a 4th round pick in this draft, but I get it. Kevin Stefanski, and then Miami Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel. First blush, people in the chat, who do you think won? We'll obviously tweet this out tomorrow. I'll probably get flamed for taking Staley and Reich, but who cares? I like them a lot. What do we think? What do we think? What do we think at first blush, guys?
I think Parker's both your guys' drafts are really good. Parker's, getting that Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Sean McDermott stack with your first 3 picks, I think is probably as good of a stretch as you can do in this draft. Eric, I think just down the whole board, you have really good group of head coaches. John Harbaugh, we know is super good in game. Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, we know are really good play callers, and then Brandon Staley buying the dip on him. So I like both of your guys' draft a lot.
Yeah, I think weirdly,
Ron Rivera top 10 comment is a that's a take. I love it.
I think Parker has the highest floor easily, right? Because Peterson, Reed, Peyton, McDermott, it's going to be hard for those guys to fail. Smith and Dable gives them some upside. I think I probably have the widest variance because, Staley and Reich and even Matt LaFleur. Look, if I'm wrong about LaFleur, the Packers are going to suck. And then we're all, it's all an issue. McVay too. McVay could retire in a week. Who knows? Harbaugh as well. Some people are thinking that Harbaugh's on the hot seat. I don't think that that's true, but some people are saying that. So I think I have the highest variance. And then Tej, you got, look, getting Belichick in round 4 is certainly a coup there.
That's a value. That's a value play.
So.
Well, yeah, the thing with Belichick is I pictured the graphic going out tomorrow and Belichick being in our 6th round. And I'm like, oh, I don't like that. I might as well just take him in the 4th round here.
You're already
jump on that grenade for us.
Yeah.
Look, you're already learning what Pro Football Focus, ESPN, and all of those like social accounts failed to learn is that it's like, look, you gotta put in some things to keep you from getting flamed. Good on you, Tej. Learning that lesson at half the age of all these other people that are tweeting out, the Celtics are 97%, or I don't even know. Like there was some things that PFF tweeted out while I was there where I was just like, you don't pay me enough to do this kind of damage control. So that's a good one for you. And frankly, I think Stefanski is also a good one. I think as we sort of get into previews on this show, people are going to realize that we're higher on the Browns than many are, including the markets. It just makes a lot of sense. Good players win football games, folks, and they have a lot of good players. So we want to thank you all.
What are we calling it?
Crown the Browns.
What's our Browns phrase?
Crown the Browns.
Crown the Browns.
No, we got to workshop that.
Well, yeah. So we really appreciate you all for coming. By the way, if you're listening to us on YouTube live, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. We want to thank Phil Mackey, Judd Zolgad, and Declan Goff for having me on today, adding to our YouTube subscribers. Greatly. Hopefully you like the show if you're a new subscriber. If you are listening to this on a podcast or something like that, subscribe, rate, and review. Write us a review. We'll read it on air, and tell somebody you like the show, because that'll help us grow and it'll give us more resource to help us do even more great shows like this. So for Tej Seth, for Parker Fleming, this has been Eric Eager. This has been episode 63 of the SumerSports Show.